invite you to take a seat. I think we're ready to get started. I'm Pastor Christine Childs, and on behalf of Maple Grove Lutheran Church, we welcome you, and we thank you for attending here or for joining us online, because this time is meant to gain listeners for a story of transforming tragedy through a process known as restorative justice. This process was undertaken by our speakers here tonight, the Palka and Thomas families, their mediators, Destiny. We are so thankful for each of you and your willingness to teach us from your journey and your experience. Yvonne Palka had emailed me just a few days before the accident to invite Jim and me to dinner, where we were going to have more good conversations about Yvonne's spirituality and the meditation she practiced. I had already learned some of John and Yvonne's rich spiritual life, going back to Quaker days and college days. While they were in India, Yvonne encountered a path within Hinduism whose core teaching connected directly to that of Quakerism. And here it is, that of God is in every person. In other words, the universal divine, a part of that is in every person. And why I share that is because from that flows an honoring for all life. And tonight feels very much a carrying forward of this belief and Yvonne's spirit and her light through a process that is imbued with grace and whose aim honors renewed life. That's a message at the core of many faiths and much needed. In the Christian faith, we are taught to love one another as Christ loved us, seen through the eyes of his life, to befriend and heal and forgive. And so may your journey draw us all closer to those divine ways tonight. And to that end, I would like to offer a prayer of blessing, which John, you actually shared with me once. I've adapted it just a little, and its author is the Reverend Jan Richardson from the United Methodist Church. O God, in your mercy, clothe us. In your protection, cloak us. In your care, enfold us. In your grace, array us. With your justice, dress us. And for your labor, garb us. By your love, envelop us now and fit us for your work. Amen.
I also want to welcome you tonight to Maple Grove Lutheran for this extraordinary event. I greet you as the president of this congregation, but maybe more importantly, on behalf of the Palka, Thomas, and Lochtenfeld family. My connection started to them in the early 2000s when Tanya and Chad and their kids and my family started attending this church. My husband and Chad knew each other at St. Olaf College. Both our families quickly became very active in the church, and we shared a common bond for outdoor adventure and travel. Our connection wasn't only with the Thomases, but almost immediately with Yvonne and Johnny and Sister Rachel. We spent many New Years together and many special trips together. We even had the opportunity to travel to Shai Beach in Washington State and camp on the ocean shores that is part and at the heart of the adventures of Yvonne's books about dragons. And I'm not telling you this as a point of sharing that I'm so close to the family, which I am, but rather to share the theme of the similar connection that so many of you here tonight have to this family. And if you're not yet connected to them, you will be very inspired by this story and the values that they share. Johnny and Yvonne raised a family that lives the ideals of including everybody and making fast friends with people. They truly care about relationships and value time together with friends and nature. So it is no surprise to us that we are here tonight to embrace restorative justice. The family didn't let the death of Yvonne change their values. Instead, it has incorporated into us or into how they deal with the grief and the way they're honoring the life of Yvonne. By using the process of restorative justice instead of punishment with destiny, they have built up relationships and people rather than tearing them down. I've already had the opportunity to experience firsthand as we planned for this event the impact the healing process of restorative justice can have on people. Thanks for coming tonight to support the families and destiny and to learn about restorative justice and how it is helping the family and all of us through this challenging journey. Thank you.
Well, hello. My name is Tanya Thomas, and I'm Yvonne's daughter. And I also have the honor of being your hostess tonight. So I'd like to welcome all of you, and also, of course, welcome to those tuning in online. We think we have people joining us from as far as Hong Kong, and England, and Washington State, and Oregon, and Wisconsin. So super glad that you can all be here together with us. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to our confirmation students and families and young adults that are with us here tonight. Because you are the next generation of drivers who will be out on the roads, and you're also thoughtful people who will grow into leaders of our community. So we hope this evening is meaningful for you, and we're glad that you're here with us. I'd like to just set the stage for you as we get started, because as you've heard, my mother's life was lost in a tragic pedestrian vehicle accident. By telling the story of what happened and taking it to driver's ed programs and driving safety programs, it's our hope that we can prevent an accident like this from happening to another family. And it's also become clear that there's more to it than that. We are looking forward to sharing about the remarkable process of restorative justice that we went through after the accident. And I know my mother would love for more and more hearts to be opened and for others to consider using this type of work. So the journey that brought us here tonight began when we were approached by the Minneapolis city attorney to ask whether we wanted to prosecute and press charges against the driver who hit my parents. My dad was adamant, being the wise man that he is, he was adamant from the beginning that he did not want to prosecute. But at the same time, we felt clearly that we wanted to seek accountability and understanding and restoration. It wouldn't honor my mother if we did nothing, if we tried to just let things go. So when I called my sister that day after our meeting with the attorney and told her about this opportunity or question, should we prosecute, she said to me, I think there are some organizations in Milwaukee that do something called restorative justice. So shout out to my sister Rachel, who's watching from Kenosha, Wisconsin right now. And she said, maybe there's something like that in Minnesota. Well, I had not heard of restorative justice. I didn't know anything about it. So I didn't know where to start, but I looked it up online, and I ended up finding that it's a well-established model used by the Minnesota Department of Corrections and many local communities. So we were soon connected with the two most wonderful restorative justice facilitators, sitting here in the front row, Michelle and Natasha, who led us through this intense and powerful process. Our work with them included, first of all, about 5 lengthy sessions, 2+ hours each, with just our family. So my dad, my sister, myself, and Michelle and Natasha. And so we worked through these sessions for hours. And then also, our facilitators met with Destiny separately. So they had their own set of approximately 5 sessions that were about 2 hours each. And then finally, they brought us together. And we had more lengthy sessions. So we probably met another 4 or 5 times for 2 to 3 hours each. The time spent together allowed us to share and tell Destiny all about our amazing mother. It gave us a chance to ask the hard questions, understand her story, hear the remorse and emotions, and cry together. Through all this, we've been able to let go of the anger, and we found love, healing, and strength. In the end, we created the video you're about to see, and it was always a vision of my dad's that he and Destiny would get to tell this story together. So tonight it has become a reality. Now I'd like to invite these 3 special people up front to introduce themselves.
Well, I'm Johnny Palka, Tanya's dad, Rachel's dad, and Yvonne's husband of 60 years. And I'd like to add my welcome to the welcomes that have already been expressed, to all of you who are here, and also to all who are tuning in from a distance. It's just hugely important to our family that so many people will get to hear the story that we want to share with you.
Hi, good evening everyone. My name is Destiny and I'm 22 years old. I was the driver the night of the accident, and my hopes for tonight is that everyone can really take away the message that we united together to bring tonight about safe driving and everything beyond the restorative justice process, how it changed our lives completely, and how we really want to extend that out to everyone further. So many people don't know about it and how it really is transformative, and I hope everyone can take that away tonight. So, thank you.
I'm honored to be here tonight with you. Thank you to Johnny and his daughters and to Destiny for allowing me into your lives during a sensitive and difficult time. I'm the executive director of Seward Longfellow Restorative Justice. It's an organization in South Minneapolis that was created by neighborhood residents, some of whom are here tonight, about 18 years ago to offer restorative justice alternatives to court. I've experienced in several different restorative processes, including the restorative conference process that we used, that you'll learn more about tonight. And I have about 20 years of experience with restorative justice, and I'll tell you that I've only become more passionate about its potential to transform the ways that we handle harm and conflict, not just in the legal system, but in our families, our communities, with our children, in our schools, in our workplaces. I want to also take just a moment to acknowledge the ancient indigenous traditions from around the globe that have influenced our contemporary restorative justice movement. I've also personally been influenced by many wonderful colleagues who've offered guidance and wisdom throughout each restorative process. And tonight I want to say thank you to Natasha, who's here with us, who was the co-facilitator with me throughout our journey with Yvonne's family and destiny. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you. And I'd also like to recognize some special guests who are here with us. You've heard of Natasha Lepsinski. Her organization is called Dialogue Up, and they were just a wonderful team together, so thank you to Natasha. Also, Pete Hosmer, sitting right here in the third row. Pete is the owner of A+ Driving School, and you'll get to hear more wisdom from Pete in the video tonight. Thank you so much for being here, Pete. And my husband, Chad, my kids, Carson and BK, thank you for being here. So now we are going to show the video. The title is called In a Split Second, and you'll notice that the video essentially has 4 parts or stages to it. The first part is the rich and beautiful story of Yvonne's life, followed by the story of the accident and what happened that evening, then the lessons learned about vehicle and pedestrian safety, and then followed by the transformative process of restorative justice. Afterwards, we'll have plenty of time for your questions. Afterwards, we'll have remarks from our 3 presenters, so they'll elaborate a little bit more about the experience. And then we'll have time for questions. So as you watch the video or as you're thinking, you should have each received a little question card that you're welcome to jot your question down on, and then if you're more comfortable, you'll be able to pass your questions to the center aisle and the ushers will collect them, and then I can read them up front. But other than that, we'll just have microphones available and we'll just have open conversation together. Okay, I think we're ready to start the video.
I'm Johnny Palka, and I'm Yvonne's husband of just about 60 years. Yvonne and I met when we were freshmen in college at Swarthmore College on a double date. You know, that was 1956. She was really a brilliant student. She graduated from Swarthmore with highest honors, and highest honors at Swarthmore was a very big deal. Instead of going to graduate school, we went to India for a year, and we got married there. We were married in India in October of 1960. So this is the one and only color picture of our wedding. Here is a black and white, and those are the remaining black and white pictures. That's the sum total of photographs of our wedding. This was the wedding invitation. This was also handcrafted by Yvonne, just like the wedding certificate, and you can see the artist, right, manifesting on the occasion of her wedding. This is the beginning of the wedding vows. In the presence of God and these our friends, I take thee, Yvonne, to be my wife, promising with divine assistance to be unto thee a loving and faithful husband, so long as we both shall live. And that's it. She was this wonderful, wonderful adventurer. We probably spent years, literally years, in the mountains, hiking and skiing, just a lot of time spent out of doors, just for the thrill of being in the out of doors in really beautiful places. And you know, the kind of the breadth of her readiness to engage was amazing. And you know, then as we got older and we had children and grandchildren, you know, then family life became really central. I mean, she was just the most wonderful mother and grandmother. She became an artist. The majority of her paintings are tied one way or another to a wilderness beach on the Pacific coast in the state of Washington, on the Olympic Peninsula, because we lived in Seattle for 50 years, just about. And regularly we would go out to this wilderness beach called Shai Shai, and it was so magical that sometimes we'd go out there 2 and 3 times a summer, and that meant we were there in the evening, and there was a fire going, and Yvonne would start telling stories. When our grandkids started coming with us, then those stories turned into dragon stories. And the kids loved them. They loved those dragon stories. And they kept asking for more and more. By that time, Yvonne had become quite a good painter in what's called sumie, that's Asian brush painting. She started collecting the stories that she invented, and she ultimately put them together into a book that she illustrated. There's a school nearby here, Rush Creek Elementary, where she had a connection for about a decade. And the third graders were always after her to write a sequel. So she finally made an arrangement with them that, well, if they give her ideas, she would write a sequel. So they did. Then she actually assembled them into a story, and she went back to the school and told the story that had been prompted by their suggestions and so on. And that was in process at the time of the accident.
My name is Destiny, and I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I got my license when I was 16, so I was still in high school. I was super excited. I was like one of the first seniors to be driving. Even when you're learning to drive and behind the wheel, or like when you go into the DMV, there's like brochures and vouchers about safe driving and teen driving. There's a lot about teen driving, so it kind of makes you even more nervous, and just knowing that you don't have that experience and now you're just operating this huge motor vehicle for the first time, and it's really nerve-wracking just because of so many other people on the street. That day, I remember I was in the house all day. Nothing really significant was happening, and it was a little later in the evening where I just went out to like grab dinner. I wasn't thinking too much of it.
We were going to a performance of Indian classical dance that was being held in the warehouse district of Minneapolis.
And then I was gonna go pick up my brother from work after getting something to eat.
And we were to meet in a restaurant and have a simple dinner together, and then go over to the dance performance. And the theater and the restaurant were 4 or 5 blocks apart, and the theater had a parking lot, so we went over there, we parked our car, and we were walking over to the restaurant.
So I was pulling up to a stop sign, and there was a car beside me on the right of me, and the street was pretty narrow. And so I was making a left turn, and the car beside me was turning right.
We came out onto 2nd Street, I guess it is. So we looked up and down, and we spotted the closest intersection, and that was 5th Avenue, and we knew that that would take us to where we wanted to go. So we went over to that intersection, which was a T-junction. There wasn't a stop sign on 2nd or a light. As I say, there were cutouts, so it was obviously intended for pedestrians, but it wasn't super visible to the driver. We stood there and looked up and down for a pretty long time. And then, when there weren't any cars, we started to cross.
And so we kind of pulled off at the same time, and I couldn't see far enough on my right side when the car had drove past me. So then as I pulled out, I saw another oncoming car coming towards my lane where I was turning. So I kind of sped up.
And we had gotten halfway or just past halfway across when all of a sudden we were hit by a car. So I was knocked down first, then Yvonne was knocked down. At that point, of course, I was on the ground, so I have no idea what the details are. What I know that Destiny stopped, like you're supposed to stop, right? And she got out, and apparently she was actually the first one to come down to Yvonne on the pavement.
I remember immediately I just screamed. I jumped out of the car. It was shocking and it was really scary. I just thought, what had just happened, or like, what did I just do? I don't know. I just wanted to make sure that they were, I don't know.
We then went off to intensive care at HCMC, Hennepin County Medical Center, reputed to be the finest trauma center in the Twin Cities. They took magnificent care of us, and they were very clear from the beginning that it was unpredictable. They were not making any prognoses. And in fact, it got worse. It got worse. Yvonne had many broken bones, but what really mattered was that she had serious brain injuries. Her ability to respond to requests to do something, that just declined over time. And so we made a decision really on the spot there that Yvonne and I had made the previous year about what our wishes were under circumstances like this. And we took that to heart, and we had several family conferences with the critical care team and the palliative care team. And in the end, after 3 weeks, we decided that the best kind of life that she might be able to lead, with no guarantees, after an unknown length of time of being totally tied to her hospital bed, was not a life that she would want.
I heard about the story through one of my employees. One of my employees is friends with the family, and she explained to me, and I read up then about what happened and when it happened, and it really touched me. Like, it was very impactful for me because it is very related to what I do. My job is to teach people that when you're driving a car, it is a dangerous weapon, and no matter how slow or fast you are going, you can hurt someone. What happens in a split second of driving? And could that change your entire trajectory of your life? Who has the right of way? So, you know, if you're coming up to an intersection and you have a stop sign, and the oncoming traffic doesn't have a stop sign, so they have the right of way. Your job as a driver is to stop behind the crosswalk to make sure that you're clearing the intersection. And your job is to watch those cars, but also what other obstacles are there. You might have parked cars. You might have construction. It might be dark. It might be not lit very well. You might have pedestrians. So I have to first say, I see that there's pedestrians that want to cross the street, and as soon as these oncoming cars clear the intersection, I gotta let those pedestrians go. And I need to look for them, and I have to really see them. In this situation, you come up to the intersection, you stop behind the crosswalk, you're looking for multiple pedestrians in multiple crosswalks. You're then looking, it's at night, you're looking for car headlights, who's coming, when you have the freedom to get through that intersection. Now, just because the cars have gone and it's clear and you think it's time for me to go, hold on, stop a second time and look to make sure that more pedestrians haven't come up to the intersection and are attempting to cross the street. At that point, when all the pedestrians have crossed and the road is clear, you can now go. This happens in all of our communities. Somebody gets in a car accident every day in every community in the United States. So this is not something that is a hypothetical. This is not something that, oh, it happened to those people. It happens to you, and it happens to me, and it happens to students. And 80% of the time for new drivers, an accident is going to affect them. This is in our town. These are people that we know. This is impactful for our students, and that's what I really hope is ingrained on them. It's all of our jobs to create the best driving scenarios that we can and keeping all of ourselves accountable to each other.
After her passing, we had a celebration of life at the church. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful occasion. And then a month later, we had a final ritual at the Hindu temple. So it just, it just worked out that way. We had Lutheran church 3 minutes on one side, a Hindu temple 10 minutes on the other side, and a home in both of them. And there were many letters that came in from people whom she had met over the years, many of them from the academic world. She just made a big difference in their lives. She was a presence that awakened something within them that they treasured. So it was that kind of network of very direct relationships that she was the hub of. And I think that it's because she developed such an open heart. You couldn't be with her and not sense that this was a person who lived in her heart. She was absolutely down to earth. She was super organized. So she was just very special to a lot of people. At the time of the accident, the case was essentially closed on the spot. So there was a police report written and filed, but after we went off to the emergency room, everything was considered closed. The case was reopened after Ivan passed away, because then it became a fatal accident and it fell into a different legal category. And we were contacted by the city attorney, who asked whether we wanted her to pursue a criminal prosecution of the driver. But we told her right from the beginning, no, we had no interest in a criminal prosecution. And the thinking was very simple. A life has been lost. It was an accident. If the driver is prosecuted, chances are good that another life will be wrecked. For what? Right? It would accomplish nothing. So we asked the attorney, could we pursue the route of restorative justice? And the essence of it is traditional justice is about punishment, and restorative justice is about healing. And it turned out, much to our amazement, that restorative justice is well established in the state of Minnesota.
I actually got a letter in the mail from Restorative Justice to reach out to them. I knew that it was regarding what had happened after the fact, because I hadn't heard anything about it. So that's how I found out about it.
Because if the goal is to heal, not to forget anything. You don't sweep anything under the carpet, but to heal despite the tragic event that happened. That has to be on a human level. That has to be on a heart-to-heart level. And so what's entailed in restorative justice is that every effort is made to make sure that what happened is clear, both as I experienced and remember them, and as Destiny experienced and remembered them, that is all brought forward and nothing is hidden.
It allowed the family for them to share their emotions with me and how it impacted their life. I get to tell them how it impacted my life.
It seems so clear to me that working with whoever was at fault and the person who was hurt, and working towards healing and trying to nurture some understanding of what happened and what it meant, that makes so much more sense than levying a fine or a jail sentence or something like that.
I know there are some people who wish that they could sit face to face and talk with the person and explain to them what impact that they brought into their lives, so that they know that personally, because sometimes they still don't understand what they've done. They just know that they're being punished for it. It's such a huge milestone now in my life, and it's been so impactful. Just like you said, it's been humanizing for both of us, especially because just to meet you and your family and how you guys have had such just compassion for me, and hearing your stories about Yvonne, even though I didn't have the chance to know her, I feel very close to her and very close to all of you now. So yeah, the whole process has been really life-changing.
So we'd like to thank our video producer, Spencer Nelson, who was able to tell that story so well. And it's a pleasure to have his mother in the audience tonight, so welcome, Pam. Spencer wasn't able to be here tonight because he's traveling making other videos, but we spent a lot of time, he spent a lot of time with us, and we really, really appreciate his work. At this point, we'll take some deep breaths And then Michelle and my dad and Destiny, why don't you come on up and we will have a few more remarks.
So during these few minutes, I want to focus primarily on just one key understanding. That everyone involved in this accident and in its aftermath is a real person with a real history and real feelings. Accidents often become a part of statistics. We keep track of how many accidents there have been and where they happened and under what circumstances. And this is all important. It guides our steps to trying to reduce the likelihood of those accidents. And Pete Hausmer's presentation that you saw in relation to driver's ed, is a great example of exactly that. But looking at accidents just in this sort of analytical way, real people tend to be forgotten. Real people, in this case, Yvonne, this amazing mother and grandmother and scientist and artist, and my companion of 60 years. The multiple generations of our family, some of them are here. Destiny, that sensitive young woman whose life is going to be impacted by what happened in a split second, and whose own mother has spent months in the hospital. None of us are faceless numbers. All of us are real people. And this is what restorative justice has helped us to really, really comprehend. We got to know Destiny in a way that no court process would even have allowed. And similarly, she got to know us and gain a sense of Yvonne, and at least to a certain extent, has been able to enter into our worlds and to know that she is welcome there. She's not reviled because of a sudden and totally unintended moment. And as you saw in the video, all of this has been possible without forgetting anything. You saw, we meticulously recreated exactly what happened on that evening of November 9th of 2019. As Yvonne and I were crossing 2nd Street at its T-junction with 5th Avenue, and Destiny was pulling out to make a left turn from 5th onto 2nd. We have relived what happened in the ICU of HCMC over the next 3 weeks. We have re-experienced our initial hopes for Yvonne's recovery and the way they dipped as the days went by. And we have heard important elements of Destiny's life and about her mother's need to be in the ICU and about her own hopes for the future. And that necessarily dry police report of the accident has become a story of life and of love. Yvonne is not coming back. She's gone forever, and we have no delusions about that. But at the same time, she has left us a legacy of being open and loving and welcoming and creative, a legacy of embracing the lives that we still have ahead of us. Had the emphasis of the post-accident process been on punishment, all of that wonderful legacy could easily have been covered over by bitterness and anger. Instead, the emphasis of restorative justice has been on healing and on the healing of everyone involved. And what is the outcome? We are here with you this evening, sharing our story. All of us together. We are here in the hope that similar accidents in the future can be made less likely. And we are showing you that even in the face of tragic loss in the family, and an undiminished sense of responsibility within the driver, the future need not be bleak. It can be filled with the kind of welcoming and openness and creativity and joy that Yvonne embodied. Yes, of course, sometimes I feel a big hole. But that hole is filled with love, not with bitterness. And yes, my tears still come. They come every day. And they probably will for the rest of my life. But I welcome them because they bring with them a sense of stillness and of gratitude for the many years that Yvonne and I had together, and for the palpable love around me that has felt stronger than ever before. I am deeply, deeply grateful for having gone through a process that nurtures tears like this, not tears of bitterness and fists of fury. That's what restorative justice has meant to me.
Hi, thank you everyone for listening and being here. My hope tonight is that everyone, once again, can leave here taking with them the message of how important safe driving truly is, and how important it is to really slow down when we have so much going on at once and so many distractions, because one wrong move can be detrimental to you and everyone around you. I pray everyone can feel how powerful it is when we as neighbors can communicate effectively and come together to create something bigger than us and use our tools to teach each other, whether that be the youth growing up behind us and haven't experienced these things, or even others our age and older who we remind about safety, and it can be life-saving and life-changing. The night of the accident, I held Yvonne's head in my lap on the ground, bawling, and she was unconscious. When the police arrived, she got into the ambulance, and they told me that she had woken up briefly and was able to tell them that she only had a bump on her head and wasn't in too much pain the rest of her body. And just from hearing that, I knew how strong she was. Just explaining the bump on her head, and that was it. After an accident like that, I knew how strong she was. And after hearing more about her from her loving family, it just confirmed it. I learned how artistic and adventurous and nurturing Yvonne was through various counts from her adoring daughters and devoted husband. They brought her character to life in full color and expressed her humanity just as they allowed humanity to be expressed in me. What I mean by that is that as Johnny said, car accidents and any fatal accident tends to just show in statistics and numbers. As I read in an article about Yvonne's passing briefly after it happened, they explained the accident in vague detail before bringing in the numbers of accidents in Minnesota involving pedestrians. While this is important to bring attention to, I had felt that the family and I were just another number in the system, and I hadn't even known them, and they didn't know me then. I hadn't even found out of Yvonne's passing until months later through restorative justice. I had no idea what restorative justice was or what it meant, but thank God I know now. Through restorative justice, and I was able to sit down and thoroughly reconcile with the Palkas about everything surrounding the accident that night that would not have been possible in the traditional legal process, which I felt I deserved 100%. I never imagined people could have so much compassion for someone and shine so much light into my life and show me so much empathy. Through the restorative process, Rachel and Tanya were able to express to me the great pain that you feel seeing your mom in such a critical condition when it's life or death. And yeah, as Johnny briefly brought up, my mom was in the ICU 6 months prior to the accident when she had a stroke, to where the doctors told me and my siblings that there's a majority chance that she wouldn't make it, and advised us it would be best to let nature take its course and we should prepare to let her go. And it is heartbreaking, and I correlated to them so much. It tore me apart to think that I brought that pain on them as well as Johnny. But they still embraced me and forgave me. And for that, I cannot thank them enough for the second chance and showing me a whole new level of forgiveness and kindness. And thank them for working with me and building this relationship so that we can come together to transform that hurt and pain into something powerful that others can learn a lot from. Overall, what I have learned from this tragic car accident is take your time when driving. Check twice, even 3 times, because we get so comfortable after driving for years or whatnot. We just think, oh, I've been doing this, I'm used to it, I'm too good of a driver, that couldn't be me, and so on and so forth. But it only takes a blink of an eye and one simple mistake for a massive and tragic outcome. What I learned from the Palkas and restorative justice is how we react to situations like this is important, because the outcome of this event could have been a lot different. But they decided to take the route of communicating to me their feelings and vice versa, choosing to forgive me and changing my life and giving this learning experience to me, and completely transform a tragedy into a team working to prevent it. Thank you so much, and I'm so grateful for all of you being in my life. So thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Destiny and Johnny, and Rachel and Tanya. And thank you for allowing me and Natasha to accompany you over this last 1.5 years. This is truly a remarkable story of remarkable people, and I think that we're all better for having witnessed their journey and their love and care for each other, and their commitment to transform a tragic experience, as Destiny said, into one of healing and hope. Well, I'm deeply moved, as you can tell, each time by witnessing transformation in each restorative justice process. I'm actually no longer surprised by the outcome. When we create space to share our authentic selves, to listen deeply to one another, and to explore our emotions together, powerful things happen. Restorative justice brings us back to our basic needs when harm happens: to be heard, to be understood, to discover ways to make amends, and to find some assurance that the harm won't be repeated. It brings us back to the potential for healing and growth within each of us. Johnny talked about the legacy left by Yvonne. As he said, a legacy of being open and loving and welcoming and creative, a legacy of embracing the lives that we still have ahead of us. Just through hearing stories of Yvonne and meeting her wonderful, wonderful family, I know Natasha and I are impacted by her legacy too. Just hearing about Yvonne makes one want to be a better person. So what do we do now? I think it would be unfortunate if what we do is leave this space, this conversation, this church, and say, wow, that was quite a story, and leave it at that. Johnny and his daughters and Destiny have given us each an opportunity to look at pain and harm in our own lives and to consider, how can I do this differently? An opportunity that exists whether we were harmed or whether we're the one who caused the harm. I hope tonight that you'll take this story and the experiences of these people, these real people, as Johnny said, and reflect on their message for you. Where are the restorative opportunities within your family, with your children or grandchildren or at your workplace or in your church to respond to harm and hurt differently? Opportunities to move away from punishment and consequences and towards healing and reconciliation. I hope that when you leave this evening, you'll continue to explore how your own life might be transformed by responding to harm and hurt in a more restorative way. Thank you again for having us. And
Thank you, the three of you. It was really wonderful to hear all your words. Thank you so much. So we now are happy to welcome your questions, comments, conversations, anything you'd like to share. If you have written a question down and you'd like me to read it, just kind of move and pass it toward the center aisle, and our ushers will come up and pick it up from you, and then we'll get it up to the front. And otherwise, we do have two gentlemen with microphones, so just if you are ready with a question, you just raise your hand and they'll come to you. And I'm going to step aside and let you three have these two mics, and I'll be over on that side.
I have a question. Am I talking loud enough for everybody? Yeah. Okay. Destiny, I'm curious. After going through this process, when you look back on the direction your life was going to take before this happened and the direction it is taken now, are you on a different path? In other words, have your life choices for the future changed?
Yeah, absolutely. When you say like choices, do you mean in terms of like?
Well, in terms of before, did you have a certain idea about what you wanted to do with school or work or having your own family? And after going through this process, have you made different choices in how you want your future life to look than it would have before this happened?
Yeah, I can say the biggest thing that that changed in me was I explained to them, even the people in my life and just the people that I grew up around and how I learned, they're not very forgiving, and so that's why I find I was so shocked by how they showed me so much compassion, because I know if this was a situation that I was in or my family was in, and it was my family member or my mom, and it happened to her, my family was, and other families that I grew up around would not be forgiving like that, and they would immediately be just belligerent and like jail that's obviously the first thing that comes up, which is why in my mind, I'm like, I deserve everything and anything that's coming to me. I deserve to be punished, and I've never experienced that kind of forgiving, and I didn't know anything about restorative justice, or that was even an option, or that people really do these processes. That's the biggest change, and other choices that I make wise, and especially obviously, with driving, I know what goes through so many minds when it comes to, you really feel so comfortable, like you've been doing it for so long, and you don't pay attention like you used to when you first started driving, and you move so fast, everything's moving so fast, you look down for a second, and you don't know what could happen. Like, I've always heard the term, you have to drive for other people, and also, you really need to pay attention to, you're not just looking out for other cars on the road. Like, people are on the road. There's pedestrians walking everywhere. And especially busy places like uptown and downtown and close to where the accident happened, you have to really be on your toes every moment when you're driving and just pay attention a lot closer. So, yeah, I took a lot away from what happened. And I also told them when it comes to the compassion part and everything that they showed me and welcoming me into their home, they are molding me into a completely different person that I used to be before everything happened. Yeah, I feel a big shift in my life and character.
You are now part of Yvonne's legacy.
Yeah.
This, better? Okay. I think I'm okay. Thank you. It says, this was clearly an accident. Have you seen restorative justice work or be used in cases of hit and runs or cases of intentional harm?
Could you say the first part of the question again?
Yeah, it says, this was clearly an accident, but have you seen restorative justice work or be used in cases of hit and runs or cases of intentional harm?
So in this particular situation, the restorative process was, instead of them choosing to pursue any other type of legal consequences, there are, and Minnesota's very active in this area as well, but a very strong connection of using restorative justice within the legal system as well. So I wouldn't say that there's examples like in an intentional, like a murder, where people are being given an alternative of restorative justice instead of the legal system, but they're definitely working together. So generally in that, and I'm also trained from the Department of Corrections. I'm a facilitator for victim offender dialogue in crimes of severe violence. And that process was developed really in response to surviving family members whose loved one had been murdered. And the person who committed the murder was serving time in prison, so they had gone through that legal process, but the surviving family members were left with some of those same needs that the Palka family had. What happened? I need to tell you my story. I need to tell you the impact, and I need to know that you won't do it again. And so eventually, the Department of Corrections kind of listened to those family members and created this process that's happening now in Minnesota prisons where surviving family members can request that. So yes, restorative principles, the restorative philosophy absolutely can be used everywhere, again, from parenting a 3-year-old up to responding to crimes of murder. It just may not always be either or. It can be, and I think that would really be a movement that there's a lot of potential for, which is just to make that legal system more restorative, because I think many people who've gone through that still leave not satisfied with that outcome. So hopefully that answered whoever asked it. If there's follow-up, let me know.
I had a thought as well. Michelle would know this much better than I, but I believe that studies have been done on the rate of recidivism, sort of going back and doing the same thing all over again once you're released from prison or you've gone through a restorative justice process. And my understanding is that repeat offenses following restorative justice are much rarer than they are in the conventional court system. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, a lot of my work is actually with youth, and so I have a lot more study in that area in terms of youth and comparisons between youth going into restorative justice or the traditional legal system, and absolutely the research is on our side, that restorative process provides much more of that change in behavior, absolutely, and the recidivism rates are certainly lower for kids who have gone through restorative justice. I think the potential there, even in the crimes of more severe violence, is that restorative justice, and as you heard tonight, really is an experience of empathy. And I won't go all into the brain science, but we know we're learning a lot about how our brains actually can grow and change over time, neuroplasticity. And so actually giving people experience of empathy actually changes brain pathways. And so I think it holds a lot of promise even in the prison system. Again, what sort of experience and learning are people having? And if they're going to have an experience of punishment, I'm not as convinced it's going to, change future behavior as to actually have that empathic experience and repeated empathy, which actually can change that kind of brain chemistry.
All right, first of all, wow. That was an incredible story, and you are all amazing. But the question is this might never happen if Tanya's sister hadn't said something about, hey, there's this other thing. And so how does the word get out, and what role, do the prosecutors have a role to play in offering this as a possibility? What can we do to help spread the word? And they didn't pay me to ask that.
Well, one thing you can do is ask for it, and so if you are harmed in some way, letting people know that you want a restorative response. I'll say, again, in my role as Seward Longfellow Restorative Justice, that's definitely something that I'm working a lot in that area, which is just how do we respond to the needs of, we'll say, victims. And I would say definitely in the last couple of years, certainly since George Floyd's murder, our offices in the 3rd Precinct, our community is asking much, much more for those alternatives. How do we live differently together? How do we have those alternatives to police and courts and things? All the pathways aren't there, unfortunately, at this point, and so it really is much more case by case as people are asking for it. I will say that the city attorney that worked with the Palkas has been very pleased with how things have gone, recognizing this wasn't, Destiny wasn't diverted. That would have been the city attorney saying, we're going to divert you to restorative justice. That was not what happened. This was the family saying, no, we're not using your legal system, we're doing our own system. But I do think it's, we're fortunate that we all came together. It's unfortunate that it had to be kind of through a Google search that the family did, and through various connections got connected to us. And so we're definitely working, at least in the city of Minneapolis, so that when people are requesting it, again, there's more pathways to say, okay, this is your contact, or that type of thing. And in fact, the city attorney's office is talking about piloting some more referrals like this one and actually making it more formal in their process. So we'll make the change by all of us asking for it and all of us shaping what that system, how that system responds, which is to say that's definitely work that I'm pretty involved in right now, which is just how do we grow those pathways? How do we make sure that as victims ask for it, there's an answer of how to get those resources?
Yeah, again, I would like to add a few words. One is that Yvonne and I had actually had a long conversation about restorative justice with a friend out in the Seattle area a long time ago, in the 90s. And restorative justice didn't really come into much public view until the 90s, so that was in its early days. So there's a certain amount of sort of person-to-person communication. Second thing is that when we asked for restorative justice, the attorney we worked with knew all about how it is embedded in the legal system of the state of Minnesota. And if you look up Restorative Justice Minnesota, the first page that Google will take you to is from the Department of Corrections. And it's an excellent page. It's as good a statement of restorative justice as I've seen anywhere. And it's the Department of Corrections. And the third thing is that partway through this process, we had a call from the man who heads the police unit that investigates fatal accidents. It's only a small unit. I think he said there are only 5 people for the whole city of Minneapolis. But he took the time to come and visit us in our home in Maple Grove one afternoon, and he stayed well over an hour having a conversation with us. And he was familiar with restorative justice and extremely supportive. Right? So I think we're very fortunate in this community that there is already a widespread familiarity kind of in the criminal justice profession, you might say, with restorative justice. And I don't know what anybody else's experience has been, but our experience was that we were supported every step of the way by the officials with whom we had a contact.
Oh, I just can't even believe the emotions I'm feeling just seeing this film and just being so in touch with Yvonne. I'm really missing her, so that's what I notice. And just the beautiful way you've gone through this. And I'm very, very, very moved. I have 2 questions, but I'm going to ask my second one first, which is what happens when the legal system steps in and won't let 2 people in an accident communicate with each other and block names and block numbers and refuse for that to happen? Can restorative justice be reached out to by one of the people in the accident to ask for that kind of restoration and healing?
Yes, you absolutely can ask for it, but it is true in that type of situation, like had the city attorney, she didn't necessarily have to ask the Palkas about pressing charges. She could have made that decision on her own, and she chose to consult with them before doing it. Had she moved ahead, we would have had a lot less say in what happened, and definitely there's a hierarchy there that once the legal system has begun, they often believe that if they're moving in that direction, it's because they believe the punitive is going to be the most effective, and so it can be hard for us to kind of intervene at that point. I think another challenge when you're talking about something that's pre-charge, would be that we're really working in very different philosophies. In restorative justice, our philosophy, and as Johnny mentioned, it's to talk about all of it. It's everything. And we know that our legal system actually generally shields people, especially the person who's caused harm, from having to tell the whole story. So if the person has in fact caused many accidents, they don't have to share that in this particular, criminal case or something. It's just to talk about what they're being charged with. So that was probably one of the kind of tensions we had to work with at first, was because we didn't know Destiny's story. We didn't know what it would be in terms of that driving, and yet we were asking her to be honest and open with us. And what if there'd been a moment when the Palkas had said, no, we don't feel good about the story we're hearing or what's happening, we want to press charges, and she would have been in a kind of vulnerable situation. So those are, not to get into too many details, but like in Illinois, they've actually just passed a law that says that the restorative facilitator conversation is privileged conversation, the way that you would have with your lawyer. We don't have that in Minnesota. So there was a vulnerability that Destiny took on to trust us and to come forward and to start to tell her story. We have a ways to go to really build that framework and really make it possible. And why, if a situation was already within the legal system, it would be more challenging to kind of back it up. But I think within the legal system, we can also still ask the legal system to be more restorative. How can you have an opportunity for dialogue, opportunity for input about what you want to make things right? That answers your question a bit.
Definitely, I just want to say thank you so much for all that you shared. It's huge.
Thank you.
I have a question from our online audience. The question is, who pays for the restorative justice process? Is that something that the two parties cover, or is that something covered within the legal system or governmental funding?
It depends. Our board members are here wondering that question as well sometimes, but yeah, it's a real question in terms of who will pay for it. In terms of our program, it's fundraising through individual donations, it's grant funding that we get, it's fundraisers. We definitely, in our program at Untitled Restorative Justice, have the philosophy that we're not going to charge people when they make that phone call and they ask for our help. We try and give that freely and let people know that if they're able or want to make a donation to our program, they could. But as you heard Tanya talk about the amount of time that we spent, it would have been, and certainly we didn't know when we started out how many hours we would spend, but it would be very challenging to charge that to a family up front, I think, and say this is what the fee is going to be. So at this point, again, it's a patchwork of programs, and I should say with Natasha as well, she was able to give this particular service, knowing that there's other places that she does paid work. But there is, it's all being funded in a very, again, sort of patchwork way at this point. And that would be something like working with the city attorney's office. We're talking with, as she's talking about giving some more referrals to us, that would be actually through some payment to the programs for doing it. So along with creating the pathways, we're needing to create those funding sources as well.
Michelle, is there resources for people who, just as parents or teachers, want to use some restorative justice without going through intensive training? Like a book or Google?
Yes, I would say definitely Google, and you will find resources even about restorative parenting. I would say overall, the philosophy is about what happened, how did it cause harm, what will you do to make things right? And so I think even in parenting or working with children, it's that conversation. And I know some of you here remember when logical consequences was kind of a new type of parenting, that you gave consequences that matched what the child had done. You broke a window, you need to repair the window. But that was the adult telling the child, this is the logical consequence. Restorative justice engages the child in that conversation. And we have actually had young people in our program that broke a window. And it wasn't through adults saying repair that window, it was through conversation with the homeowner whose window they broke, and the kids could come to that conclusion themselves to say we should repair it. And they did work alongside someone to repair it. So I think that's where, if you're having conversations, it's focused on that. What happened? I was harmed? But it's talking about, this is how I'm hurt too by what happened, you know? And then what can we do to make it better? And part of that always is not doing it again. And so with youth that we work with in our program, sometimes the making it better is joining a book club, joining a sports team, doing a college visit. Those are all ways that young people kind of make things better. So I think if you're asking those questions, you're on the right track towards a restorative mindset, a restorative philosophy.
Probably have time for one more question, if there is one. And then we'll wrap it up.
Good.
Destiny, this one's for you. You had mentioned that your friends and family wouldn't have been so forgiving if the situation was reversed. How are they feeling about what you've gone through, and are they supportive, and how are you encouraging them with this?
Actually, I have a really small immediate family, and my mom. It's really just my mom, dad, and like my 34 brothers. And my brother knows about it, and he was being supportive. And after I told him, of course he was shocked by it, but he was being supportive of me taking responsibility, and proud that I took responsibility right then and there, and wouldn't even think about running off or dodging consequences. And he was supportive of me working with the family, and that we even were able to come together to bring something like this. And besides him, my mom, she can't comprehend what's going on. And my best friend Jessica, she also was someone that was there. She was actually the person that I called that night. And from there on, she's been my person to be right there with me. They've met her too over our Zoom calls and met in person. And she's been like my biggest support system through it. And she's also proud that we were able to come together so well. So yeah, from my little bit of family that is there, they're just glad that I stepped up and face to face, like you take responsibility take accountability for it's an accident, but you caused damage and you need to face it. And just that we brought something so great out of it is, yeah, they're very supportive of me doing that. And I'm really happy that we could come together the way that we have. Yeah.
Sharing your story.
Thank you.
Is there time for one more?
Okay.
I'm holding the microphone. So, Destiny, so we haven't met before, and we're here in this time of loss, and the last thing that I anticipated thinking at this moment, meeting you, was that there's a lot of qualities in you that I admire. And I'll just name a few that I've noticed this evening. You're very expressive and honest, and I sense that maybe you even have a sense of peace and are capable of forgiving yourself. And I'll just say that these are beautiful qualities, And they're things I want to have more of in me. So I want to lift you up in that regard. But that's a lead into my question, which is that as we all look for some kind of closure, not closure, but the next step in this, what comes to me through this discussion on restorative justice is something like new life versus loss. So in our loss, how can we get new life? And so my question for you is, it would do my heart good if I heard something about your dreams for your life. Anything at all.
Yeah, thank you so much. Growing up, I always wanted to be in pediatrics, mainly because I have sickle cell, so I grew up like in and out of the hospital all the time, and I realized that nurses have had such a big impact also in my life, because when I got into after I would say 15, 16, I had to start handling it by myself. And even still being in a children's hospital, the nurses would be like, you're just so quiet, you don't ask of anything, and you're here by yourself. And they were being so uplifting to me. And when you're sick and you're down and you're in the hospital alone, those things really matter and they really count. And I appreciate all that nurses do for us. And being in the children's hospital, I was there until 21. It's just, even the volunteers that come to play with kids and everything while they're in the hospital and being sick, I wanted to be a part of that, basically. And I'm going to school for a pharmacy technician so that hopefully I can start easing into healthcare. And I think I really want to get back into that. If I can get into the hospital setting, I want to work with kids who are sick and make them feel better. Mm-hmm. And just put a smile on their face and uplift them and let them know that everything, is going to get better and they'll be okay. So that would make me happy.
That reminds me of my mom. She used to make kids smile. So thank you all. It has truly been a remarkable journey to get to the place where we are today. And we appreciate all of you being part of that journey. We'll just close with some words from Pastor Chris. And then we'll be here afterwards, so if we want to chat more, that'll be good too.
I forgot I was supposed to have some more words. I don't know what more words can be said. Truly, truly, all of you. But let us take these words and this journey with us. As Michelle said, you hit it exactly, that we don't just hear this story, but we take it in and we share it in all of our relationships. And just share the message that restorative justice is available too. Help that. And so we thank you all, and please let us express our thanks one more time to all of you for bringing this incredible story to us. And we ask the divine spirit of God and God's blessing and peace be with you and us all. Thank you.